Okay, group, so we are on the 1.4 notes. So this is section 1.4. We're dealing with segments and angle bisectors. So in this particular set of notes, there's something that I want you to pick up here. And it is that there is a difference between segments being congruent and segments having equal measure. There is something very different about that, and we're going to talk about that for just a second. So, when we're talking about segments being congruent, we're literally just saying segment AB is congruent to segment CD. When we're talking about their actual measures, okay, so distances, so this is actual measure involving a number. So we're talking about the distance, we say AB is equal to CD. Same thing for an angle. We can say angle ABC is congruent to angle DEF, and the measures of them are equal. So measures are equal. And so let's talk a little bit about something called midpoint. Midpoint is a point that is in the middle of a segment. Hint, mid, right? Midpoint. It divides the segment into two congruent segments. So in this diagram, okay, M is the midpoint of AB. So we know that AM is congruent to BM. If we had their actual measures, so say I knew that both of these were 2, right? Then I would say AM is equal to BM. This is if I'm talking about the measures of those. Okay? All right. So, and then also too, these tick marks right here, those are used to show that something is congruent. So whenever you see that, it's saying that those two segments are congruent to each other. Let's do an example of midpoint so you can kind of see it in action here. So in this diagram, M is the midpoint of JK. Find the value of X. So if M is the midpoint of these two, that means this section is equal to this section. So I can say JM equals KM. Well, let's go ahead and plug in what they actually are. JM is X minus 14. KM is 33. Now we have an equation that we can solve, and we can get X. We're going to add 14. Oops. So we'll get X equals 47. So midpoint just tells you that two things are congruent, two items are congruent, segments are congruent. And you can set those two equal to each other if you have some measurements. Segment bisectors are just a little bit different in terms of, they might be considered an add-on. So a segment bisector is any segment, line, or plane that intersects a segment at its midpoint. In this diagram, line L, right here, is bisecting AB at point C. Therefore, point C is the midpoint of AB. And that tells us that AC, or segment AC, is congruent to segment BC.